and welcome in to another episode of Heat of the Moment. My name is Micah. I am joined, as always, by my fellow host and friend Lino. And if you guys can't tell, we're in a little bit of a better mood this week than last week. We are not in the midst of a 10-game losing streak. The Heat have actually won 3 in a row, with potentially some winnable games coming up. So, of course, we'll discuss all of that. A lot of this show will be about that Golden State game because it was Jimmy Butler's return to Miami. Very emotional. I'm excited to discuss that with my pal Lino. And Lino, what have you thought about how the Heat have kind of looked? What's the vibe check for you right now?
Man, we are and never have been more so back. We're back, baby. It doesn't matter what's happened over the past season, over the past 6 months. These past 7 days have been glorious. We have killed our demons, a very particular demon, to be specific, and we're also just playing at the level one could imagine this roster could get to on occasion. We just never imagined we'd never get to see the roster perform at its highest level, which is what we've experienced since the trade deadline. But hey, better late than never. So lots to feel good about this stretch. Lots of questions still to ask about what we're supposed to do with the rest of this season. But I'm never going to complain about winning basketball. It always points to the right direction for the future. And it's exciting to see these guys start to, mesh together, play games with the chips on their shoulders, and really get after it in a way that I feel like has been absent since the trade deadline and really since the Jimmy issues first arose. The energy of this team has been different, but over this past week, I think with a common enemy in mind, this team has really come together to really kick ass for at least 1 week, and I'll take it for now. We'll see what happens, but how have you been feeling lately?
It's been a ton of fun. Obviously, last show we talked in depth about what kind of this losing streak meant as far as where the Heat would finish in the lottery, potentially what the best lottery scenario would be. And that was very understandable to talk about during a big losing streak. But of course, as the Heat do, right when we think we know we have them figured out, they flip the other way. So they've put together some very nice wins. Quick recap for anybody. Since the last episode, they did lose that 10th game in a row to Houston, which it was pretty close. I didn't think it was a particularly bad performance. Houston had a monster Fred VanVleet game. Amin Thompson was very motivated after that Tyler Hero scuffle from the previous Houston game. So it's a good Houston team. But yeah, then 3 solid wins, blew out the Hornets, which that's a team the Heat should be blowing out, even though they lost to them last game. So that felt good. The Golden State win, a huge victory. I believe it was one of the 5 largest margins of victory by the team this season. It was 112-86. That's the team or the game we'll get into the most. And then last night, a 10-point win against Atlanta, where, like you referenced, those fourth quarter demons popped up a little bit. And I was like, are they going to blow another lead? And they were able to hang on. So I'm excited to talk about both those games. Over this span, the Heat are 4th in net rating, 10th in offense, 3rd in defense. If you've been watching these games, that feels about right. They're shooting 50% from 3, so that'll definitely help everything look a lot better. On the season, still just 18th in net rating, but I feel like we're better than that. We're starting to show it a little bit. But Lino, I want to get into that Warriors game, man, because it
Let's do it.
was, I mean, as far as regular season games go, it was as nervous and as like into a game as I can remember being. It was I was having flashbacks to Dwayne Wade's first game after he went back to Chicago. I was worried about, the interactions. I was looking at like who Jimmy was talking to pregame because, we hear rumors, but as fans, we care about these guys. We want them all to be friends and be happy. And so this was the first time we'd really get to see them interact with each other and get an idea of how these relationships have played out on a human level. So I'm excited to talk about what happened on the court. But before we even get to that, emotionally, as a fan of Jimmy and the Heat, now that they are separate entities, how did you feel about the interactions between those parties in this game?
Dude, I could not deal with it, especially with all the information that was coming out of the pregame news media. I was overwhelmed. I was like, this guy really hates us, and that doesn't feel great. Like, he got paid, he got sent to a place where he can win, for all intents and purposes, he got what he wanted. And I thought we could, at least move past it in some way. But you could just tell that there's still so much animosity and that he really just didn't like how things were going here. I think way more than I anticipated beyond just the money. Like I think he didn't necessarily get along with Tyler and Bam in the way that I thought he did there at the end, and I think clearly his relationship with Pat had been completely eviscerated. Whatever was there at the beginning that we got to see, and his little homage video that they did pregame, none of that exists anymore, and so that was just really sad to deal with emotionally for the most part. But at that point, I was just like, man, I just don't want us to get killed by this team, especially when it seemed like Steph was going to end up playing. And I was like, these guys, I think, want to kill us, and I don't love that. Being
Yes,
in
there
that
were lots of
situation.
quotes from non-Jimmy Warriors, Draymond, Steph, Kerr, like being like, "We want this one for Jimmy. The guys are motivated for Jimmy." And I was like, "Guys, we're the 10th seed in the East. Like, you have nothing to prove." Like,
But at the same time, they had everything to prove, I think, in the grand scheme of their season. Like every win counts in the West right now, and the difference between them being the fifth seed and being the ninth seed is a very small margin. And so, we'll get into the result of this game, but going into this game, that is one of my concerns, is that this was not just a game they could just throw away. Like, this is a 10 seed. We're not even going to respect Miami enough to give them the effort. Like, we'll see what happens. Like, they actually needed to win this game. Like, and it's going to have implications for them at the end of the season when it comes to playoff seeding. So, I was definitely anticipating a very motivated Warriors team, and that's not exactly what we got. But they did get a Miami Heat team that was ready to punch them in the mouth from tip off. And so it was
yes.
a very exciting game. But, as you were watching the game, because you actually got to watch the first half live, I was just so emotionally distraught about this. I was like, I'm going to watch this recorded later, so I can at least know how it goes. Like, I just can't go into this game not knowing how it's happening. And so I didn't actually start watching until halftime. I went to the gym. I played a little bit of pickleball. I did some woosah, some self care. But in watching that first half, walk me through your experience.
It was nerve-wracking for sure. It felt a lot like an elimination game, which I'm sure sounds funny to like teams that have actual playoff aspirations this year. But yeah, it just felt like from the jump, every possession was so important. And like you mentioned, Steph did not play, so that changes the whole geometry of the court, especially for the Warriors on offense. But both teams defensively were very locked in. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
Warriors, they were up for this game for sure. Even, I mean, Jimmy tried to downplay it in the first half. Jimmy, it Heat fans have seen this game from Jimmy a lot. He had like 2 points at the half. He was setting screens, doing stuff. It wasn't like he was doing nothing, but he wasn't super aggressive or engaged on offense. But defensively, both teams were going at it, and that means physicality, and that means animosity, and that means a nervous Micah on his couch, worried that Bam's gonna hit Jimmy, and then they're gonna get in a shoving match. And I'm gonna be like, I thought they were friends. The game basically opens with a loose ball situation where Bam inadvertently hits Draymond in the mouth, and so Draymond falls to the ground, is bleeding. Bam turns around and dunks over Jimmy. I think that was either Miami's first or second basket
I think it was
of
the
the
second
game.
basket, his first score. I did see that. That
And so it's
was
like the tone,
glorious.
and that along with Bam starting on Jimmy with that defensive
Mm-hmm.
assignment, it was like, okay, the tone is set. Like,
Yeah.
we're getting the version of Bam we get when he plays, the guys that won Defensive Player of the Year over him, the guys that got
Oh, yeah.
selected to Team USA over him. Like, we're getting Ultra Instinct Bam out of bio. And it was so cool to see, because going into the game, if you would have asked me, I would have been like, oh, Wiggins will be on Jimmy. Like, that's, if we were playing Golden State before the trade, that's who would have been on him. It makes sense. So when it came out that Bam was on him, I was like, oh, this is a personal, and they're taking this as seriously as you can take it. The same way we saw Spo put Bam on Tatum in the playoffs
Mm-hmm.
last year. Like, that's the ace. Like, if you
Yeah.
want to shut down a team, that's what Spo's going to do in a must-win situation, which is what this team treated it like. But yeah, I mean, to me, it was a defensive game, and that starts with Bam and the work he
Mm-hmm.
did. I mean, Jimmy is a great player. We know that he's an incredible offensive player, even when he's not being a super aggressive. But there was a reason he wasn't super aggressive, and it was because Bam was working like crazy to stay attached to him. Jimmy, as we all know, is a
Those
mismatch
switches.
hunter. Yeah, so he was hunting Tyler, and to Tyler's credit, I thought he had, in that specific role, did a really good job defensively because he would show his body, he would let Jimmy hit him, and he would just take enough time to let Bam get back in the play. And of course, Bam is a supernatural being on
Mm.
defense. So it does not take him long to get back in that play. But we've seen over the years, like sometimes Tyler just gets, out physicaled and the guy scores. So it was very cool to see Tyler have that moment because we knew Tyler was going to get hunted. Not
Yeah.
even, I think Tyler and Jimmy's relationship is probably one of the better ones left from this team. But Jimmy's always going to hunt the smallest guy on the court, and he did get a couple layups on Tyler, but really not much. And that
Hmm.
was because Tyler was rotating and showing well. And yeah, I texted you this, but Bam in these situations reminds me a lot of the Dragon Ball Z character Gohan, especially for Dragon Ball Z fans that really are like keyed in on it. But the Cell Saga, the whole thing is like, oh, Gohan has all this potential, but he's so kind-hearted. He cares about every living thing. Life is precious to him. He doesn't want to be a fighter, and that's what Bam feels like. It's like, oh, defense is precious to him. He loves playmaking. He doesn't want to just score and hog the ball and da da da. But man, when Gohan snaps, and he
Yeah.
was the strongest fighter in the universe, and Bam's the same way. When Bam's there was a play, it was like the second or third time down, Bam brings the ball up the court, just immediately goes into like his hezzy tween bag, spin move into a double team. He still shot it. I was like, oh, okay.
He's
I was like,
I'll
this
take
is
it
this is
easy.
a different
Yeah,
Bam.
he was acting very different. And when I went back, I've admittedly, we're going to lean so far into this because this may be the best part of our season, like this one game. And so
Undoubtedly.
I won't lie, I watched this game 3 times now. I went and
Yep.
listened to the Locked On Warriors podcast, and I went back and watched it again, just to see how the Warriors are feeling. And I know you texted Jaron in the group chat mentioning that you went and watched the game with the Warriors broadcast team just to hear
Yes.
their frustrations. Like, this is our championship for the year, honestly. But in rewatching that first half, um, Bam's intensity was awesome, but I will say I enjoyed the lineups. I enjoyed what everybody was trying to do, and I do think we have an advantage as a roster over that team, especially when they don't have Steph Curry. And listening to the Warriors podcast, they seem pretty disappointed because they feel like they have a better roster than ours, even without Steph Curry. But what they lack in size, what they lack in strength and athleticism. Like, I think we actually have that with Andrew Wiggins, Khalil Ware, like, and Bam Adebayo. And if Bam Adebayo is going to play like a 1A type of player, and he's got, a 7 foot next to him, and then another really incredible defensive wing, and lots of shooting that clearly showed up tonight, like, that's just going to be very difficult to beat for anybody, but especially a Warriors team that doesn't have Steph Curry. But I just love that, Bam led the way with that intensity in the first half, and everybody else followed suit. Davion Mitchell was out there going crazy. Khalil Ware, looked at Quentin Post like a child. Looked at Draymond. Khalil Ware had Draymond Green wishing he retired like 2 years ago. He was like, this guy has got too much going on. He's too big and he's got too much athleticism. And so being able to take those advantages and make things happen was super exciting. But of course, we get to halftime, and it's halftime. And we know how the second half has gone for this team for years. And we know Jimmy Butler, and we know what when he's ready to lock in, he locks in. And so that third quarter got kind of scary. I was very concerned that we were going to let go of the rope. I'd honestly set myself up for it to happen. And it got kind of close there. But walk me through your experience in that third quarter,
Hmm.
as I think they cut the lead down to around like 7 or 8 points. And then we were able to get it back up to, I think, 13 going into the fourth.
Yes.
But how did you kind
Yeah.
of experience that?
It was so it started in that second quarter, like you mentioned. I think they got it down to 8, and then Tyler threw up a crazy floater, and so it got back to 10, and then he hit that 3 almost at the buzzer. They got it
Mhm.
to 13 and a half. So it's like, okay, I feel okay about that. Third quarter was more back and forth, and yeah, I think it was 13. It was okay, I think I'm getting confused. But yeah, so going into the fourth, the Heat are up
Mhm.
13. As all Heat fans know, that's nothing.
That means
It
nothing
could
to us. We might
could
as well be
dis
down 13 at that
could
point.
disappear in the blink of an eye. So yeah, it was. I think I texted you this in the moment, but I was like, all those fourth quarter collapses, I'll forgive them if we just hold on to this lead. Because like you said, and if there are other fan bases listening to this thinking this is sad, It kind of is, man. It's been a tough season, but this was our Super Bowl. Okay. We're not gonna sit here and be like, oh, just another game. Like this was important. And they held on, and to me, they mostly held on with defense. I mean, the Heat had an
Mhm.
insane shooting game in this one. I think they shot almost 70% from three, but in tremendous defensive efforts from the guys we talked about. But some of the bench guys, I mean, Haywood Highsmith had the
Oh my
Jimmy
gosh.
assignment several times and did really well. Kyle Anderson had a fun little revenge game against the Warriors.
Mhm.
Andrew Wiggins blocked two threes, which is insane. And, there were hustle plays, guys diving on the ground. I think the Heat forced two shot clock violations, two more that were like heaves at the end of the shot clock. They forced a 5-second violation on Jimmy. Bam also blocked a three. I mean, this was, in my opinion, by far the best defensive performance by Miami this season. And it was funny because the Warriors, obviously, they didn't have Steph, but when they don't have Steph, they deal with a lot of the same issues the Heat did for much of the Jimmy Bam build, which is when you have Jimmy and Draymond on the court, that's just not a lot of shooting.
Mhm.
And then they don't even have someone like Tyler or Duncan. They're relying on Buddy, and he's really the only shooter you're scared of. And Moses Moody can shoot, but he had a tough night. Gary Payton the second, it's not much of a shooter, so it was really cool to see the
Yeah.
team hold on in that fourth quarter.
And it was
At,
really cool. I was just gonna say, with the guys, or when it felt like things were starting to slip a little bit there in the third and fourth quarter, just watching guys like Kyle Anderson and Haywood Highsmith just make plays and just be difference makers
Mhm.
in the ways that we really hoped they would be at some point in time. It just felt like such a big relief. It was like, okay, this is what I imagined would save us from, just completely letting go of the rope since the trade deadline. I was like, we have these pieces that should be able to just sustain. Like, you don't have to go on crazy scoring runs. We don't need to blow out every team by 30. But if we're going to go into the second half and go into the fourth quarter with double digit leads, like, can we just sustain what we've built? And it takes, guys just making the right play and heads up plays, especially when the other team is starting to build momentum. And so it was really awesome to see guys step up. Obviously, the 3-point shooting was tremendous from everybody. I wanted to go through some of the player performances from that game. Andrew Wiggins, I thought, actually started off kind of shaky offensively. I could kind of tell that he also really wanted this, but it was kind of coming in a nervous way on the offensive end. So dialed in on the defensive end, and honestly was like making some good looks with passing the ball. I think he finished with 5 assists that night.
Yeah, and if I can just to say something real quick on that, that's the other. Now that we have Wiggins, that's like the coolest part about putting Bam on the opposing team's best player is Wiggins is on Moses Moody, and Moses Moody's like, "Whoa, dude, I'm not a number
I'm
one
barely
option.
important
What
for
are you
this.
doing over here?" So, I mean, Moody, not to pick on him, but had a very rough game, and so just yeah, to your point, Wiggins' defense was tremendous,
Yeah, and he was incredible. Tyler obviously got to all of his shots. Has been highly, highly efficient over the past 3 games.
unbelievable.
It's kind of unbelievable. And then just our role players, Davion Mitchell, just coming in and just being just a guy who needs to be on the Heat team for a very, very long time. And just to go back to Wiggins, I did think it was very endearing that he wasn't very efficient that evening, but he made things happen in every other aspect of the game that it just didn't matter. Like, yeah, you can chuck as many shots if you want if you're just going to keep blocking their threes and creating transition baskets. Like, I don't care
And
what you do
and
at
he
that
was coming
point.
off the 40-point Charlotte game, so it was
Mhm.
hard to
Yeah.
ask for much more.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it was just all around. It was cool to see. I like the rotations from Spo. I feel like we didn't overthink it. We got a couple minutes. Some. It is sad that we get victory formation minutes from Jaime Jaquez Jr. But you know, I'll take it. I'll take whatever it takes to get a win like this.
Yeah, that was the other thing that made it feel like a playoff game was Spo was not messing around about that rotation. He
No.
played 8 until it
Mhm.
was over. He played 8, and it was the starters, Davion and Kyle, obviously, and I think was it Pella was the other
As far as
bench
the
piece?
8, it was the starters, but they had Burks, Mitchell, Highsmith, and Anderson kind
Oh
of
yeah,
floating
Haywood
there.
was the other guy. Yeah, Burks also deserves a shout out. Duncan has been out. If anyone has been watching, he's dealing, I think, with a back issue. Alec Burks professional sniper, dude.
dude.
And I mean, he is. I mean, it's been all season. Heat fans, when Terry was playing, when different guys have played, they've been calling for more Burks minutes. I don't know if he'd be in the rotation if Duncan was available, but gosh, it's nice to have him when Duncan's not available
Hmm.
because he probably would be categorized more as a specialist, as far as being a shooter, but a very
Yeah,
well-rounded game by specialist standards. I mean,
I'd say so.
he can put it on the deck. He had a nice drive and finish through contact on Jimmy. He can play make a little bit. Defense, it mostly feels like he's just trying to not be in the wrong spot, but that's
Yeah,
fine. There's a
which is
lot
great
of.
because he's not bad enough where people are really attacking Alec Burks
Hmm.
because he's got good size,
Hmm.
and he's usually only guarding like the third, fourth best player on the other
Hmm.
team, and so he was put in a good position to be a specialist, and he's not a complete traffic cone, and so it's been awesome. And it's hit 5 out of 7 threes that night. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy. But you know who else made a ton of threes? And we've talked about this guy already plenty at this point. Let me double check. I may be missing something here. How many threes did Bam hit? He had 2 of 3.
Two of two,
But
or yeah, 2 of 3.
he's been kind of lighting it up from 3 for the past 5 games. I've
I
got
was
that
gonna
pulled
say,
up
I think
right
it's
here.
5 in a row he's hit a three
Mhm.
in.
Yeah, he's gotten plenty. I think, 1 for 2, 2 for 3, 1 for 3, 2 for 4, 2 for 5. That's exactly what I would hope for him as far as best case scenario shooting
Hmm.
threes. Those shots become incredibly important and worthwhile if he's going to shoot it at just a modest clip like that. So, yeah, that's probably enough on Bam, but just great job leading this team
Yes.
through this victory. And yeah, I wish I could have more things to say other than everybody kicked ass for 2.5 hours.
But it felt like it, man. It was really just everybody was locked in. We talked about Tyler a little bit. I do want to hit on Tyler. In this game, I feel like it would have been so easy for him to feel like he had the most to prove. Like
Hmm.
there was all the discussion about, Jimmy talking about how the offense has changed. They just want him to stand in the corner. All that could have been taken as subliminal shots at Tyler. And Tyler is somebody in his career that has taken, been hit with enough shots that he could easily have taken that personally and tried to force too much, taken 28 field goal attempts, but he
Hmm.
really let the game come to him. He used the immense amount of defensive attention he was receiving to his teammates' advantage. I thought he's been having some spectacular passing games lately. He set up a lot of these Alec Burks threes with
Oh
some
yeah,
nice skip passes out of Spain action. We'll talk about it more like in regards to the other games where he's been shooting phenomenally, but the growth offensively from Tyler, it almost makes me feel as if he's absorbed all of Duncan's best qualities. You know,
oh
it,
no, just
yeah,
like absorbing a twin in the womb or something crazy.
yes, yeah, it reminds me. We'll just double dip on the Dragon Ball Z reference, but Majin Buu like absorbing Gohan and like getting his outfit. That's what it feels like. Because when Tyler, early in his career, but it's like, oh, Tyler should start. But it's like, well, Duncan works so much better with the starting lineup because he can play off ball so well. He'll set
Mhm.
screens, he'll cut. Now you watch a Tyler game, he'll have a quarter where it just looks like Duncan out there. He's cutting to the basket, getting a pass from Kyle Anderson. He's setting
Yeah,
2 off-ball screens. He's attacking off the catch. I mean, just a very polished, mature offensive basketball player that is. We'll talk about it later, but his contract negotiations this summer will be interesting because he's
yeah.
up for a 3-year, $150 million extension. And we know how confident that young man is, so I'm sure he's going to feel like he deserves that. So we'll
I
see where
love
that
that kid.
goes.
I think
Yeah,
he's gonna definitely feel like he's going to get paid, but we'll get more into that.
yeah.
After this wonderful victory, the team, post interviews were pretty interesting. I felt like everybody was doing their best to save face as far as, this is, we got to win every game at this point, at this stage of our season. But it felt really good to win this one. So I'm glad people were at least honest about that. It's like, we really wanted to win this game. And they did. And so shout out to just everything they put together to make this one happen. And then we hosted the Hawks
Hmm.
right after that. That started off kind of ugly in a way that
Yes.
I kind of anticipated. I was like, we're going to hit a mean slump after the adrenaline of just a crazy win like that. But we sure did turn things around in that game. And so I was really excited to see. This is a great game to talk about Tyler. Like, oh my gosh, 36 points. And I think I'm trying to remember who tweeted. One of the reporters tweeted that not a single play was drawn up for Tyler in
Yep.
that game.
Spo
36
said that in the
points.
post game.
36 points just purely from, you know, working within the space of the offense and working off of what the other team is giving him. Truly, truly special game from Tyler to get us back into that and get us going. But also, I feel like another locked in game from Davion Mitchell, who can just really ratchet it up. So shout out to the
It
guards for what
and
they're doing.
and hates the Atlanta Hawks, apparently. Davion has fried them this season.
Jesus. Man, I don't know. Maybe they skipped him in the draft or something, but they gotta go apologize to that young
I
man.
know. I do think a good portion of it is that Trey Young matchup. I think,
Mhm.
I mean, Davion is obviously an incredible defender. He can guard up, but when he's guarding an elite player that's smaller than him, which Trey is one of the only guys you could say is that, he's like, I can turn this guy's water off. Now, and Trey
Yeah.
had an awesome game, but none of it was on Davion. Let me tell you.
Mhm.
I mean, he was all over him, and that just feeds his energy. We've had games where I feel like Davion might have been too passive. That was not the case in this one. It was not the case in the last Atlanta game where he went 5 for 5 from three. It was he's so much fun to watch on both ends right now.
It's true. And what, I think he went 4 for 5 this time around. So just still
Hmm.
lighting them up from three. Really locked in on that end. Tyler, I think, did just such a great job being super efficient. But there's another thing about Tyler's game that I wanted to bring up, but I cannot remember. Oh, he did all of this on Dyson Daniels. Like
Yep.
Dyson Daniels was his primary defender the whole game, and he just didn't care, which I feel bad because I really like Dyson Daniels as far as a depoy candidate that's not Bam. Like, I like the way he plays. I think he's an amazing defender and a huge difference maker for this Hawks team in ways that I don't think they actually anticipated. But his defensive player of the year candidacy is ruined.
Hmm.
Tyler Hero put that to bed.
Yeah.
That was
He's a
kind of
steals
crazy.
merchant. Steals
Mhm.
merchant. He's just gambling for steals.
Just gambling for steals. And so, yeah, it was really cool to see that. You had texted me a little bit about, Khalil Ware's play and that situation. And I think overall, I've been very happy with what I've seen from him in the ups and the downs throughout the season. And he's slowly, not slowly, I'd say, I think he's on pace in a way that a rookie should be in the role that he's in. But could you talk to me just about, what you experienced watching Ware in that game?
Yes, yeah. So Kalel I felt like he was great in the Golden State game and very good overall in the Atlanta game. I think the most important thing for Kalel is to figure out how to be impactful on both sides of the ball, but especially in offense when he's being ignored. I think you're
Mhm.
seeing that more and more, especially in the double big lineups. Unless he's at the rim being a threat, teams are just like, okay, have fun. And I feel like recently he's done a very good job being aggressive, trying to get inside positioning, and he took a little mid-range jumper out of the post. He's taking some hook shots. He's just showing the defense like there's more stuff to worry about than just a lob. But yeah, the text you're referring to, which was kind of funny, was there was a sequence where Kalel gets switched on to George Niang, and Niang kind of floats out to the corner, and a pick and roll is happening up top. I can't remember exactly. It's probably Trey Young, and Kalel's watching the pick and roll, like ready to be a help defender, swat Trey Young's shot, and he's locked in on like what angle is Trey gonna take. And while he's watching Trey, George Niang just walks behind him, gets the ball under the basket and gets a layup. I was like,
Awesome.
Kalel. So,
Oh,
rookie mistake in the truest sense. Nothing like super concerning, but I was like, man, this is like having an ultra talented rookie like this is what you get. You get, like, I'm not exaggerating. During that Golden State game where he was like, I mean, this is a little exaggerated, but abusing Draymond like
he
that,
was
like
beating
just
the shit out of Draymond
in
Green.
my
Excuse
notes,
my
it
French.
says it's yeah. In my notes, I just have Khalil keeps little boying Draymond over and over again,
Just
which I can't stand Draymond like as a fan, like in a healthy fan kind of way, but he's like my favorite opposing player to beat because
mhm.
he's Draymond.
He's got
And
that kind of energy.
yeah, he's got the edge, and when he beats you, you hear about it, and so you want to
Mhm.
beat him. All very healthy, not like any hate to him as a person. But man, when Khalil was doing that, I say this in hyperbole all the time. I'll be like, I'm buying the jersey. I'm buying the Wiggins jersey. I'm buying the Mitchell jersey. Y'all,
Uh,
the second quarter of that game, my Amex got the charge. And I I got the white Vice jersey. It is on the
Wow,
way. I was
that's
like, I'm
beautiful.
committed. Please don't trade him for KD because
So is that the Wiggins jersey or the Wear jersey?
the wear jersey.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Ugh.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love the kid. I think he works so well in this roster, and I think he's learning a lot from everybody involved. And he seems to be really latching on to this development program. Um, and yeah, I think this roster it's just been nice to see them put everything together at the same time. Even with the fluctuating in scoring, Tyler leads this one with 36. Bam and Wiggins have, 12 and 16 respectively. Bam has his big game the night before. Tyler has 20. Wiggins struggles with efficiency against the Warriors. Against Charlotte, Wiggins has 40. The other guys, maybe not as efficient. That is like a natural thing to see in like a trio. And that's what you want to see is like somebody steps up, the other two fill in the gaps, and then your bench, has nominal scoring throughout it. What we were experiencing for so long is like one person would have a 30-point game and the rest of the roster would all average 7 to 9 points. And it was miserable. So it's just been cool to see that the bench against the Hawks. I mean, Davion Mitchell had 16, Highsmith had 11, Kyle Anderson had 10, Pella Larson had 3. You know what? Shout out to Pella Larson, by the way.
Yes.
Will not matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, it does not really show up in the box score, but this guy came into these games and just kicked ass for like 3 to 7 minutes each game. He's doing everything that we loved from Jaime Jaquez Jr. in previous years, or in his previous year, where he just kind of came in and had this great energy he brought in with confidence and would attack, and just knowing that there's no scouting report for him, that he can just go out there and do anything he needs to do. It's been awesome to see.
It reminds me a lot of early Caleb Martin too, where
Yeah.
it's like this guy is just gonna like go headlong to the rim. He'll make an open three if they give it to him. He's gonna be super active on defense, and yeah, Haywood, Davion, that bench unit brings so much energy defensively. I think it really serves as a spark for the rest of the team, and it's been fun to see. And yet, like you were alluding to, I think the idea of this team, especially post Jimmy trade, is you don't know whose night it's going to be. And this team, in theory, should be very comfortable emphasizing whoever has it going, and then working off that. Spo was saying that in the last post-game press conference that, there's some nights where the defense shifts more towards Wiggins. So Tyler gets more catch and shoot opportunities. There's some nights where they're super tilted towards Tyler. So it might only be 10 or 12 field goal attempts, but he's setting up other guys, leveraging the defensive attention to create playmaking opportunities. And obviously this isn't the stiffest competition. Everything could fall apart, but it seems like the guys are at least getting in a rhythm with how to play off of each other, and how to be more unpredictable on offense, even though, of course, 50% 3-point shooting won't stay forever. It does seem like some of the offensive things are being figured out.
Yeah, and that's what I really liked about it, is that the defense is so locked in that even if we didn't shoot 58% from 3 against the Warriors, we would have won that game shooting 40% from 3, shooting 35. If we shot average from 3, they still only scored 86 points. And
Mm-hmm.
even if they shot a little bit better from 3, they might have gotten to like 100. But there is such a gap because of how well we've performed that we can actually survive a dip in that, because it's not like we only won that game by 2 points and shot 68% from 3. That's how we were winning games at the beginning of the season. We had
Yes.
crazy shooting to win by an incredibly small margin. And so this has been just a difference maker for us. And one last guy I wanted to talk about in regards to the Hawks game is Kyle Anderson. I saw some really fun stuff in this game from him, and Spo kind of putting the ball in his hands to run kind of like a point slow-mo, which is really awesome because he's just got great vision and great pace when it comes to running the offense and managing things. And going into that, third and fourth quarter where the Hawks were starting to make their comeback, I think he played a big role in, keeping that gap comfortable for the most part, and then Tyler kind of putting it away on ice. But what did you see from Kyle Anderson throughout the night?
Yeah, so Kyle, I have really been impressed with how Spo has figured out a way to utilize him best
Hmm.
because he's such an intelligent player. You know he's going to do the right stuff when he's on the court, but that doesn't mean he's an easy fit with his shooting limitations and things like that. And I feel like Spo has found a really nice niche for him as kind of like this backup unit ball handler. He's great on defense. You don't have to worry about that, but yeah, because in theory, and this has been said about a lot of different, um, lesser shooters throughout the NBA, but like Ben Simmons was one that was talked about a lot. When the ball's in their hands, you can't just play 12 feet off them. You can't be a help defender because you're on the ball.
Hmm.
And Slow Mo does a great job of leveraging that. Also, weirdly, like wanted all the smoke with George Niang. He saw he
Yeah.
saw that matchup as disrespectful. Yeah, I
He
mean,
said, "Y'all gonna put Jordan Yang on me?"
it felt like all 10 of his points were just like, oh, this guy, one hesitation, super slow step, Euro layup. And I was like, yeah, get him, Kyle. Like, this is fun. But yeah, he hit Tyler for a great layup in that game. I want to say the lineup with Kyle was the best lineup in that Hawks game. I can look it up in a second, but it really felt like the unit with him, Davion, I think it was like Haywood, Tyler, and Bam had a great stretch there that really kind of secured that win because that was another one where it was 5 points with less than 5 minutes left. The Heat went
Hmm.
on a run to extend the lead, but it could have gotten shaky like some other games similar to it have. So I think he was a key part of that working.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, all together, that combined with blowing out a Charlotte Hornets team that we definitely should have blown out, like they're not good. Um, it was just a good week of Miami Heat basketball. I just feel like I don't know if we're going to continue to have these weeks, just given that usually the opposite of what's happened on what we're talking about in the pod usually happens in the next week. Um, I'm sure we're going to go into a really bad week of basketball, but right now, it feels good. It's been very exciting. I think this is replicable. Like the things that are going well, 60% shooting from three, not replicable. That's going to fall off. But luckily, we've won at a margin where that can fall into a normal range. And if we can keep up some of the other things that really matter that are sustainable, like making the right plays down the stretch, having smart rotations, being really locked in on defense and creating turnovers, scoring in transition, these things that we've seen over these 3 games that really allowed us to blow the ceiling off of our potential. Those things can translate through not only the rest of the season, but future iterations of this roster. There's a good chance we do too well that Bam or that Pat says we run all this back. And so at least we can see that this team knows what winning looks like, and we can see what winning would look like for this team in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But it's definitely put a bit of a damper on our draft situation. So I wanted to ask you could you paint the picture of kind of what our situation looks like right now, not only with our pick, but with the Warriors pick, and kind of what you foresee for our future in the draft?
Right. Yeah. So, the last episode, we talked about kind of the different situations that might happen with the Heat in the lottery. As of recording the last episode, they were eighth, which is a big difference from where they are now, which is 10th. Doesn't sound like a huge difference, but eighth in the lottery has almost double the chance to get a top four pick. It has about a 26% chance. Whereas being 10th, I think is like a 24%, or sorry, a 14% chance to jump into the top four. So what does that mean? It means it might be if you're gonna it's if it's the 10th pick versus making the playoffs, it's probably better to make the playoffs. Give a pick. It would end up being the 15th pick to Oklahoma City this year. Go ahead and get that obligation out of the way. We talked about it a lot last episode. If it's a top 8 pick that could turn into a top 4 pick, then you can talk yourself into might be best to miss the playoffs. And as a Heat fan, we'll talk ourselves into it either way. But this recent stretch, along with some other teams struggling around them, has made it a lot more likely that the Heat are going to finish 10th in the lottery, could even be 11th. They have a chance to jump Chicago, which is also very interesting for the play-in race, which now we're kind of pivoting back to that situation. So the Heat right now, I believe, are a game behind Chicago, which if you didn't see the Chicago Lakers game, I thought the Heat were going to be like half a game behind Chicago, but then Josh Giddey hit a half court three to change that. But the Heat still have one game left against Chicago this season, so obviously that could be big. They could make up a whole game on them. Chicago does have the tiebreaker, so that's important to keep in mind. And what all this will lead to is who is hosting that 9-10 play-in game. It seems unlikely that Miami will be able to catch Orlando or Atlanta for the 7-8
Mm.
spot, but hosting the 9-10 game is important, and it would give the Heat a good chance to still secure that 8 seed, which would be important. So yeah, I mean, right now the projections have changed. Before they were going back, Miami might have been 8th or ninth. Now most projections are showing them as being a razor thin margin between them being 11th or 10th. So that's kind of
Does
what
it
we're looking at.
does it change your opinion at all as far as, do you personally feel like me personally, I feel energized to try to make the playoffs. I don't care. If they can win basketball games and this is what it looks like and feels like when they win, I'd love to see them in a playoff series. That would be really fun. Um, and, the draft situation, I just don't know that we're really going to get a difference maker there. I'd love to just kind of give away our pick this year and try again next year and just kind of get rid of those situations. But has this week of basketball shifted you one way or the other in that kind of a returning conversation we've been having about whether or not we should tank?
Yeah, I think it's tough. I don't know if it's shifted me in the sense that, like, analytically, the most efficient thing to do would be to lose as many games as possible. Like, I acknowledge when we're looking at like championship equity, that's probably the best thing to do. But I also know this is about being a fan. This is about having fun. And so, yeah, I've really enjoyed this team playing well. I talked about this last episode. I care about these guys as a fan. Like, I want to see them smiling and having fun. So, the alternative being they're either in street clothes looking miserable, or they're
Yeah.
having fun trying to win. And like we talk about all the time, basketball gods, karma, like, we don't know what this will lead to, but and we also know the Heat are gonna try and win.
Mhm.
We're kind of just uh, creating like a
We're
revisionist.
cosplaying as like a normal basketball organization that really does weigh these things when we know
Yeah,
it's like they're gonna try to win as many games as possible.
yeah, and as fans, we're gonna make it work. Like, they're not whatever they end up doing, whatever ends up happening. It's not going to be egregious. We've laid out why it could go either way. You could make a good case to do either thing. So with that in mind, yeah, I'm gonna roll with whatever happens. But it has been fun to see the guys win some games, and if they make the playoffs and we go ahead and get that pick obligation out of the way, maybe we have a fun showing against one of the top seeds, and we'll have a whole summer to kind of figure out what to do with this roster. I will say, if we want to look at it, it's been a while since we've thought of this Heat team as like a young team per se, but
Mhm.
they are kind of that now. I mean, Bam, Tyler, and Wiggins are in their prime, but there's a lot of young guys, and even those guys are on the younger end of their prime. And it would be an interesting showing to see them in the playoffs. Just see Khalil Ware in the
Yeah.
playoffs. See who, maybe Pella or Davion. That
Especially
would.
with these contracts, you bring up a good point. Just with contract decisions coming up over the next year and 2 years, um, I think we can trust that Bam and Tyler are at least going to be good in a playoff series more times than they're not. But it is always good to see who's going to be a real playoff riser and who is not. So many young organizations or like young rosters have to go to the playoffs and just because they need to find out who's supposed to stick around because it's really hard to make that judgment based off of just the regular season. I mean, I think OKC went through this last year where they were like, oh, let's take this to the playoffs. Let's not make any trades. Let's not move anybody yet until we know, who's going to matter, who's going to stick, who's going to be a playoff riser, and who's not really built for the moment just yet. And so I would love to see Ware in a playoff series. Pella Larson feels like a guy who's going to really surprise us in a situation like that. Having Tyler and Bam be primary, offensive engines for us, and Wiggins in their prime as the sole options and not a superstar otherwise is something worth knowing about before we decide whether or not we're going to pay Tyler Hero, $150 million a year. And I feel like with Bam, everything's pretty locked in place and people feel pretty confident, but it's always good to just be able to see it. And so, yeah, I think you bring up a great point that information is valuable for us as a team and as far as where this roster can go in the future.
Yeah, it's valuable for those guys too. I mean, if
Hmm.
Kalel's like, "Whoa, they're not going to guard me in the playoffs. I have to this summer work on, whatever he deems the counter to that to be." And
Yeah,
that could be super valuable for the franchise going forward. So, yeah, if you've listened to this for long enough, you guys know we're going to make a way to see the silver lining and whatever happens. And we can look at the upcoming schedule. They have at Philly, who is trying to tank in every sense of the word. They've already ruled out almost their entire roster for tomorrow. Embiid, George, Maxey, our old friend Kyle Lowry. I mean, everybody's out. Then they have at Washington, another game they should win no matter what's going on with this Heat team. They should be able to beat those teams are in the marchest of March basketballs right now, trying to lose games. And then they have at Boston. That's going to be a very difficult game. And then they have versus Memphis versus Milwaukee. Memphis just fired their coach today. That was a crazy thing. And then Milwaukee, very sad. They announced Damian Lillard is going to be out indefinitely with a blood clot issue. So both of those teams have a lot of off court stuff going on. And, you never know, but the Heat, even if they don't win games, could have good showings against some of those better teams that make you feel good about where they're headed. And funny enough, if they take care of business against Philly and Washington, they're going to follow up a 10-game losing streak with a 5-game winning streak.
that would balance us out pretty well. That would be nice. And I think it'll be it'll be a fine week. In understanding what the rest of the season has been like before this past week, I could definitely see some disappointing losses coming up in this 5 game stretch. But I'm hoping that this team can just show at least just regress to the mean if they're going to regress at all. Like if we can just get to like average against some of these games, I think we should still win most of them. But I'm excited to see if they can build on the momentum that they've had because, winning games feels good. And I think once you start figuring it out, you can start to replicate it. So we'll see what happens. It is very bizarre what's going on in Memphis and really unfortunate what's happening in Milwaukee. So hopefully that doesn't rub off on us as far as oh, we got our own locker room problems right now. But it is really sad to hear about Dame, man.
Yeah.
That was crazy. I feel like I don't know, maybe I just didn't pay attention to how many players were getting blood clots through watching basketball my whole life, but it just feels like a thing that keeps popping up now, like that and labrum tears. Is
Yeah.
that what it is? I was like, these just keep popping up. Like, are more people getting these injuries? Or are we just learning more about the names of injuries that they used to
Yeah.
just rule as like something else in the past?
Yeah, anybody on Twitter at In Street Clothes, I believe his name is Jeff Stotts. He covers injuries from an NBA perspective better than anybody, and it's been interesting through the years just to hear him talk about like, oh, this is the I don't a hamstring strain year. Like for whatever reason, everybody's just there's just more of them. It is, and the blood clot thing obviously is especially scary because that's
Yeah,
something that could literally be lethal. And now we've seen it with Dame now, Wimby earlier this season, Asar Thompson last season. Of course, as Heat fans, we remember how scary the situation was with Chris
with
Bosh ended
Bosch,
up
right? Yeah,
ending his career, which it doesn't sound like these situations will be that serious, but yeah, so alarming. Glad they caught it. But I was talking to our mutual friend Josh, who's in the medical field, and I was like, "How do you even know you have a blood clot in your calf?" And he was saying it would be like sore, inflamed, like a lot of redness. And Dame, I believe, has missed some games with like calf strain or calf issue. So it's just so
hmm,
scary to think about. Like they were not totally sure what was going on with his calf, and then it ended up being something so serious. So yeah,
wow.
hopefully. I mean, I don't know the different timelines. I wouldn't think he could get back for the playoffs, but it'd be awesome if he could, as long as it's in a safe way. So, well wishes to Dame, one of my favorite almost Heat lifers of all time. So definitely hope the best for him.
Yeah, absolutely. But we'll see what happens. Right now, I'm just gonna try to relive this week on replay in my mind, just because it was such a
Yeah.
satisfying feeling. And maybe we'll get to next week and we'll have similar feelings there too.
Yeah, the other thing on the news that just slightly ties back to the Heat. So Memphis today fired Taylor Jenkins. Very shocking. I'm assuming we don't know all the information right now. Surely it's more than just they didn't like the fit. But it's hilarious because just a few episodes ago, I was like, yeah, Memphis brought in that guy from Europe who like redesigned their offense, and that's working really well for him. And now that guy's the interim head coach. So to anyone that heard that,
Oh, dude.
I was not implying whoever they hire should take Spo's job and that we should fire Spo. But yeah, that was shocking. So the NBA, it always keeps you guessing. We'll see
Always a
how it
new story
unfolds.
somewhere.
hmm So thank you guys all for listening. Very fun episode. And yeah, I think we have an exciting week ahead of us. I think they can take care of business and maybe get one of those games against a good team. But we'll be back with you guys to cover every bouncing basket, as Eric Reed would say. Thank you guys for tuning in. For myself, Micah, my good friend Lino. We'll catch you guys next time. If you're watching us on YouTube, please comment, like, subscribe, Spotify, different podcast platforms. Please follow us. If you have any questions, please let us know. We would love to answer any of your questions. And if not, have a good one, and we will see you guys next time.